What a very, very special night. This is one of those nights where you're with people who share the same value that you have. It's that human compassion, that desire to, I can help. I can really make a difference in this world because I know something. I know what it is to grow corn or maybe to grow a vegetable. And this organization epitomizes the very, very best of America. And really started, what was 1963? Roll back, some of you are too young for this. Well, the rest of us. You roll back, 1963 was really something in America that was different. It started out that year, it was Camelot, it was America, the strength of America, the things that we could do. Ask not what you can do for what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. It was the Peace Corps. It was all of that excitement and a desire to reach out across the world and to really make a difference, to have an impact, to address the problems of the world. And there was absolutely nothing that couldn't be solved. The year ended in a tragedy. But we moved on. And this organization was right there at the beginning of that enormously important moment in American history, where we were part of the world and we were engaged in the world. We were going to change. And we were going to solve the problems of the world. Think back. The American farmers, basically, and others that are involved in the agricultural industry of this nation, in the cooperative movement, knew that they had something of great value. They had something very, very special to offer. And it's what they learned. It was what their life was. It was the cooperation, the joining together of this farmer and that farmer and working together to not only grow the crop, but to figure out how to process and market and get that to the markets. Knowing that working together, they would have strength, that they would have the ability to solve their own problems, to create greater wealth for their families and for their communities, and provide food. You took that idea, and I use the word you because you are the ones that have done this. You took that feeling, that emotion, that need, that desire that you had, and you took it across the world. And you took it to the very, very far reaches of the world, far of which you just saw up on the screen. And you've made a difference. You have made a difference in the life of the people all around this globe of ours. And you've left behind some extraordinarily important attributes and things. You've left knowledge. You've left hope. You've encouraged people. You've left a structure. You've left the kind of organizations that people can then use and grow to solve their own problems. That's a good thing. And you should be very, very pleased with yourself and what you have accomplished. And if you don't give yourself a big cheer and shout out, I'm going to do that for you because you deserve it. Our granddaughter's here somewhere in the audience, and not this trip, but on a previous one, we took her to some of the monuments around town, and we wandered down through the FDR Memorial, and it came across, the great sayings and quotes of that time. And one has always stuck in my mind. I'm going to just use it tonight because I really think it fits with what you have accomplished over these 50 years. And it's this, and it's there, etched in the stone. The test of our progress is not whether we add more to the abundance of those who have much. It is whether we provide enough for those who have too little. If there's ever an organization that's done that for 50 years, it's you. You've done that. Many of you are part of organizations here in the United States that do very well. And your members have done well. But you've moved beyond that. You've moved beyond that to the great world out there, and you've taken those words and you've put them into action. You've made it happen. Patty and I have seen this. We've seen your projects. You saw the Ethiopia coffee thing. To sit down in one of those co-ops, which we had the opportunity to do, and participate in the coffee ceremony, which is really a big deal in Ethiopia. You just don't do anything important without having a coffee ceremony first. Okay, you do that. But what you see in those men and women that are conducting that ceremony for you is the pride of success. The pride that they have within them that they have achieved something really very, very important, that their work is known throughout the world as being really good work, really good coffee. And since Patty and I are Peace Corps volunteers, you should only buy Ethiopian coffee. I know there are other places around the world, and you've been involved in those, but hey, we can be just a little bit proud of what we saw. You know, and what you see. I don't know how many of you have been able to go back to the projects that you were involved in years ago. I can't, well, I guess I can see you. Just roll back the film. Okay, we don't use film anymore. But think back to where you started that project years ago. Patty and I had this experience 2 years ago. It was 40 years ago that we were in our village in Ethiopia. It was Metu out in the Illabarbour, southwestern part of Ethiopia. And I tell you, it was way out. There was no electricity. There was no running water. There was a school. Patty was a school teacher. I worked with the Ethiopian government's community development organization in that province. But it was really out there. We had a marvelous time, by the way. We lived in a wattle, mud hut, tin roof, dirt floor, outhouse out back. It was a great honeymoon, dear. And it really was. The plans that we worked on came back full to us 40 years later. We went back, Patty wanted to go back and visit her school. And so we went to visit, coffee ceremony. As we came back to the town, we noticed the road had been paved. Previously, maybe 2 months out of the year, you could actually travel that road. Came back, coffee ceremony. Mayor said, "Would you like to see the school?" "I'd love to see the school, thank you." And we go over to the school on a paved road through the town, roads that the group I worked with laid out that this is the way the community should be built. The school was up on a hill, and about 200 yards from the bottom of the hill to the school. As we arrived, that whole 200 yards filled with students. On one side, it had to be maybe 500 or 600 girls, and on the other side, the men. And they were all dressed in their school uniform. Something very, very special had happened in those 40 years. First of all, half of the students were women. Secondly, there was a whole lot of them. And in the area, they'd also put in a university and had electricity and running water and all of those things. We went back to Patty's classroom. "Would you like to see her classroom?" "Yeah, I'd love to see my classroom." In her classroom, seated in the exact same seats when she left them 40 years ago, were her students. The 3 women in the class were still in the front seat. She demanded the women would be in the front seat, or the girls. They were still there, and the others had become teachers and successful in their community and had endured some very, very traumatizing years during that intervening 40 years. But they were there. And one of the fellows said, and Patty had asked him, how is it that you had survived? How is it that you had been able to educate yourselves and continue on and become teachers and community leaders? And the Befecato, who was the oldest and the biggest and the class monitor, said, "Well, you taught us." And Patty said, "Well, how?" And he said, "Do you remember the first day we were at school, that you came to school?" I said, yeah, I think so. He said, you taught us to work together, to help each other. And that's what you're doing. That's precisely what you're doing. You are teaching people around this world to work together, to come together in a cooperative, in an organized way, to help each other, to find this success as best they can. We have seen this happen. We saw this happen in our own experience. More recently, we've seen this happen in the experience that I've been fortunate enough to carry Patty's luggage as she and the board of directors have gone around seeing these projects. Now, this is really something husbands should do, you know. I know women, okay. A few men think that's okay, too. But I'm thinking of a project, an ACDI VOCA project in Tanzania. We saw this. It wasn't a ACDI VOCA trip. It was a care organization trip with USAID. And we saw one of your projects in Tanzania. And it was the rebirth of a 40-year-old effort that was undertaken by the then socialist government in Tanzania to build a large farm, 5,000 acres. It was going to be a rice plantation. And over the years, it simply hadn't worked. So what had happened? The pumps had degenerated. The water wasn't getting onto the fields. It was basically an abandoned project. But you came along with USAID. You came along, and you brought back to that extraordinary opportunity a four-letter word called hope. And you used your skills. You used the knowledge that you have acquired and used over the years to regenerate. And I guess we started at the pumping plant. The pumping plant had been refurbished. There were plans to bring in new pumps. And we're talking about a lot of water for 5,000 acres. I could have sworn that I was back in my district in California, which is the rice center of California. It was exactly the same board of directors. It was exactly the same, it's my project, we're going to do it this way, da-da-da-da. It was a co-op. And we went out to the field. It hadn't, not 5,000 acres, it was probably just a couple hundred acres that had been the genesis of the rebirth of this whole project. And the most extraordinary thing happened as we began to listen to these members of the co-op. The first extraordinary thing was they were all women. Okay, we know who does the work around the world. We know who does the work in my family, and the rest of you can either agree or depending on how you want to feel about it. Gentlemen nod and say, oh yes, dear, you're right. Come on, you got to go home. You wanted to be happy. But the enthusiasm, Veronica, I think was her name. This woman was filled with energy, and she was dancing and said, we're doing it, we're building this, we're going on and on and on. And we may see some of that same enthusiasm when I leave this podium, which is going to be in a few moments. She was so filled with energy. And I remember her saying, 2 years ago, I had 5 children, my husband wasn't with me anymore, and we were in trouble. She said, but I've got a chance now. I'm growing this, I've got my plot of land, I'm growing this kind of rice, they're teaching me, I'm learning this and that. She was dancing and singing, and she said, now I have a car, and my kids are going to go to school. This is the success that you have brought. This is the work that you have done. And you should take great satisfaction. You should have pride in what you have accomplished and what you will do in the future. You are the embodiment of America's most important value, the value of sharing, the value of teaching. And as FDR said, you're helping those who have little. I've got one more line, and I'll leave it at this. This is from Nelson Mandela. And ponder this for a few moments. We hope his health remains an extraordinary individual in the history of the world. But he said this. He said, "Let there be justice for all. Let there be peace for all. Let there be work, bread, water, and salt for all. Let each know that for each, the body, the mind, and the soul have been freed to fulfill themselves." Thank you for the work you do. Congratulations on the 50 years.